my parents were, one evening, my father came home from he'd been out for a drink with friends. My dad was into the homebrew kind of hobby. He came home with a bottle which he said a friend had given him. Said it was vodka, just needed to water it down and he could drink it as vodka. So he and my mum and a friend did that, and they had a drink because it was coming up to their anniversary, and they drank this vodka. The friend had less than them, I think, left shortly afterwards, and it turned out to be a methyl alcohol, which was can be used as an engine cleaner. That ultimately poisoned them and killed them in quite a painful and excruciating way.
Which left you, your 9-year-old brother, your 15-year-old sister, your 16-year-old brother alone.
Yeah.
What did the social services do back then?
From my recollection of it, there was very limited intervention. We went on a couple of trips in the first few months, which weren't very pleasant experiences.
But who did they decide that someone should look after you, or that James, your
we will never
16-year-old
know.
brother, should do it?
From what we know now, just from speaking to James and from what we knew, James was called to a meeting with the council at 16. He was a young 16-year-old boy grieving over his parents, and he was asked, "Do you want to look after the children?" And he obviously said, "Well, yeah," and that was it. He was left to do that. There was no court case. There was no procedures followed, and that was it. We were left there on our own, and now we'll never know the truth because we don't know. There was no records to say what happened.
Right, and give our audience an insight into what your daily life was like as an 8-year-old, with your 9-year-old, with your 15-year-old, with your 16-year-old brother apparently looking after you.
It went from being just a normal family, siblings arguing and fighting, and a very warm family environment, food on the table, all sitting around and having our tea of an evening, to overnight just becoming chaotic. James quickly, with that responsibility, the pressure for him became too much. His life went quickly downhill. Clet went to live with a distant family member. Well, say distant, not one that was very close to us, and within a week was back with us. She had learning disability, so she really struggled. And then for Stephen and I, we were straight away put in a position where we had to fend for ourselves. We quickly realised that it was down to us. We were only kids, and we'd have conversations like, "Can you feel that pain in your stomach?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it was hunger.
What were you eating?
There was nothing. There was, the dog biscuits was an instant where that's all there was in the kitchen. So I would just nibble on dog biscuits. If there was bread, I would put something like vinegar or anything else, condiments that you would normally find in the cupboard. And we would repeatedly walk into the kitchen and open cupboards, knowing quite well there was nothing there to eat. So there was nothing. And James his life was falling away, and what minimal benefits he was on, which we still don't know. If we did get a chance to get money off James, we would go and buy some noodles or something that we knew could last or sustain us for a few days.
Were you going to school?
We missed an awful lot of school. There was no. You can imagine, there's no boundaries, no adult figure to get you up in the morning or push you to go to school. So you were kind of your own boss, really. You just left to get yourself up, to get yourself dressed, to get yourself fed, to get yourself to school on time. Which quickly, if we were hungry, or we were really hungry, we'd just stay in bed because it was easier to stay asleep, pull a blanket over your head, and try and get by until you would get something to eat, and then enable you to go to school.
Is it true that you and your 9-year-old brother used to share a uniform, and he'd go for a couple of days, then he'd give the uniform to you, then you'd go for a couple of days?
That went on for quite a while, especially in the early aftermath of my parents' death. We really struggled with just all normal clothes. We would share a lot. Basic socks and underwear, uniform was a problem. So yeah, it was very, very difficult. We had to kind of just get by with each other, and me and Stephen became, we had to be a unit.
It's extraordinary on so many levels. It's almost unbelievable. Where were relatives? Where were teachers saying, who's looking after you? What's happening? Why haven't you been to school for the last 2 days? I just don't. This is only the 80s.
Yeah.
It's not the 50s.
Paternal side of the family, my dad's side of the family, weren't close to my father anyway. I think there was a lot of family problems on his side with his relationship with his siblings. So they never played a part. His mother must have been in her 80s. She was very, very old, and she lived distance away, couldn't travel, and she had illnesses, and she died within that year of my father dying. My maternal side, there was a lot of family issues relating to them. Either lived too far away, or had their own real issues that weren't in a position to look after us. But the responsibility was put on James. So I would say in the first few weeks where people could rally round or try and help, then we realised it was just about us, and the help kind of disappeared, or just became less. Where I think we became very good at not feeling like a victim, not wanting people to think we were victims or we were beggars, where we put up a front like we had to think, we had to stay proud and make people think we were still okay.
Yes.
So I can't look back and say, and blame certain people, say, well, why didn't you help? We were crying out for help because we were became very hard to say we're okay, because we was in fear of being taken away, you see. Right,
okay, so that was the worry, that if you said we need some help here, you thought you might be split up as siblings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking to James, that was the ultimation and the responsibility put on his head, which for me is just diabolical. He was such a young kid, and he wasn't a very outgoing, strong-minded kid. He was quite an introvert. He stayed in his room playing his records. He'd go to school, and he was a very bright lad. And then ultimately, within 24 hours, he said, now you're a father of your siblings, and now you have to look after the finances, you have to look after the house, the bills. He should never have been put in that position. So yeah, it was very difficult for James.
As an adult, I mean, you did all fend for yourselves,
yeah.
and you've gone on to achieve. You got a scholarship at a good school and so on and so forth. But as an adult, then you start asking questions and looking back.
Yes and no. I mean, I think for all four of us, we didn't look back. It was a case of it was too hard to look back. We always tried to, especially Stephen and I, look forward. That was that. We need to keep looking forward. It actually came about as when I met who's now my wife. I met her in '94, and she was a Great Britain athlete, and she was travelling the world, but she always wanted to go into social work, and so she qualified as a social worker. But she'd always ask questions about, no, that wasn't right. I'm sure that wasn't right. So when she got educated in this field, and she had the knowledge, she started asking the questions to me and then pushing me. And it all started with the headstone. We went to visit the grave. I showed her, and it was just a very deteriorated wooden cross, and she said that's unacceptable, and she pursued the council to see if there was anything they could do now to pay for that headstone for
your
us.
Parents, yeah.
The response was, we've got no record of you. So she thought, hang on a minute, this is not right. So she applied under the Data Protection Act for all our files, and I believe they had a statutory period where they had to respond, in which they didn't respond within that period. And she repeatedly requested these files, and I think about 3 months later got one letter through the door saying, we've got no record of you, you didn't belong to this authority, you belong to a different authority. So kind of, we knew quite well we belonged to that authority, trying to push us in another direction. So we showed evidence that we lived in that property, and they came back and said, we've again looked at the files, yes, you did belong to this authority, but we still got no record of you at all. So that was the driver. Then this was a case of, hang on a minute, yeah, we now understand what happened to us was wrong. We're now looking back in the past and remembering what happened, and now we don't exist. And that was, for me, was the most hurtful thing. That was insult upon insult. So it was my wife that was the driving force behind the whole.
And the council have awarded you and your siblings £75,000 compensation, which tells you what?
That tells me it's a token gesture that it was they've accepted some failings, they've accepted something, but we don't know what. And I just believe it's in the hope that this will be brushed under the carpet and go away. And that's how I see that.
But you want what?
I want answers. I can't go through life now knowing what happened to us and just being regarded as the kids that never existed. What happened to them records? Somebody somewhere has answers. There's people who are probably still alive and now, who were involved in the organisation or the authority, work for the authority, that know something. And I appeal to them people to say, come forward, give us some closure and let us have some answers. And also, how do we know any lessons have been learned? How do we know this is not still happening now or still going to happen to other children put in that position? Without them answers or an inquiry or some serious case review, them questions will never be answered.
We have a statement from Liverpool City Council. They say the City Council has publicly acknowledged that it let these young people down over 30 years ago. Since that time, there have been many changes in social work practice and safeguards in place to prevent this happening now. Would you like an apology from them?
I would. It'd be a starting point. For me, it's too late. We started pursuing these files 7 years ago. And since then, they've repeatedly fobbed us off, ignored us, and never, even after the award, they've never directly approached us with an apology to say, we failed, we don't know why, but we hope it never happens again. There's been nothing, so an apology now, it would be too late.
A couple of comments from people who are watching and listening to you this morning, Tony. Lynn on Twitter says £75,000 is rubbish compensation for that family of 4 children who were abandoned by the local authority when their parents died. And Peter has emailed to say a disgrace that the council think such a small amount of money is compensation. Yet after this admission, once again, no names of those in social services are published or questioned or even prosecuted for negligence. But for you, I think it's just, you just want to find out why it happened.
Why it happened. I'm convinced there's people still around now who were involved with the case, who know about the case, who have answers. And why they're sitting quiet really disturbs me. And I'd like them to come forward and just talk to us, just explain their side of the story, or if they were involved in any way, and say, this is what happened. But at the moment, we've had absolutely no idea. We've had no answers at all.